Out of the Storm-Swept Night by Rosa Zagnoni. The wind howled and slashed at the gables of the bungalow. The rain beat a deafening tattoo against the windows and trickled down their surfaces. The tall pines bent and swayed, and the branches smacked against the east wall, their needles rasping like nails against the stucco. Rivulets of rain gushed over the overflowing eaves. Flashes of lightning rent the sky in the direction of the valley. The thunder rumbled and groaned, and the hills echoed the boom from east to west. In the library, Mrs. Bradford was lowering the shades, going on tiptoes from one window to another. She smiled to herself and kept going, on tiptoes so that the children would not wake, as if they could hear anything with that infernal noise outside. It was a habit with Mrs. Bradford to tiptoe about the house when the children were asleep. It was also a part of that atmosphere of mute protection that she created about them, especially when their father was away. She was becoming accustomed to passing nights and days alone, since her husband had been promoted to the position of travelling accountant with the firm with which he had been connected for the past 15 years. Still, she always felt safer when he was at home. Things did not seem quite normal unless he was there. The storm made her nervous, and after drawing the shade, she sat near the open fire, reluctant to go to bed. Splashing of the rain. Howling of the wind. Beating of the pine branches against the stucco. What a night. She sat there by the fire, her shoulders jerking nervously, biting her lips at each toll of thunder, trying not to feel the tremor that crept subtly over her even to her fingertips, and that strange impression of impending disaster that a storm invariably created in her mind. The clock on the mantel struck 11. The front door blew open. The east wind scattered papers and magazines to the floor. The lights flickered. The fire sent up a shimmering of sparks. She arose to close the door, and the wind whizzed through the room, blowing apart the portieres. As she stepped into the hall, she came face to face with her husband, standing on the threshold of the open door, rain pouring from the lower brim of his hat and over his shoulders. She ran to him with an exclamation of surprise and joy, pushing the door shut. Her husband, his coat collar turned up, was smiling down at her, and she, forgetting the storm, was asking, "Why did you come back so soon? How did you come into town at this time? I thought you were in Denver tonight. Oh, I am so glad you came home." All solicitude, she tried to take his coat, but he seemed reluctant to let her perform the task, and was making his way into the library, saying, "I came home with a friend. I wanted to see you tonight. Let us sit by the fire, dear. I'm glad you are happy to see me." He sat in his chair by the fireside. She hovered near him, looking into his face. "Why, dear, take off your hat and coat. You are so wet." But he shook his head. "No, honey girl, I am somewhat cold. I would rather sit here like this for a while. How are the children?" "They are fine, asleep. They'll be so glad when they know you came home to surprise us. But dear, you are pale. You are so very pale. Are you ill?" She drew near him and tried to reach his hand, but he thrust them in his pockets. She touched his cheek caressingly with her fingers, withdrawing them quickly. "Why are you so cold? So cold. I'll make you some coffee, a hot drink. To come home in this storm. You are chilled." She started to go into the kitchen, but he motioned her to sit down. "No, don't bother. I am all right. Sit here by me. Let us talk of the little ones." She sat beside him, a moved look on her face. Talk of the little ones? Strange. Why did he want to talk about the little ones and sit there in his wet overcoat with that hat pulled over his face? An inexplicable feeling of weariness came over her. "Yes, dear," he was saying. "Let us talk of our little ones." She bent forward, looking fixedly at him. He was staring with averted face into the fire. He seemed almost a stranger to her, sitting there with his hat on. "Our little ones," he was saying. "Why, Denny will be 14 soon. How time passes. And Dorothy, 11? Denny should be an engineer. He should go to college. He will make good. It will be pretty hard at first, but he will make it." He paused. Mrs. Bradford asked slowly, in a faraway voice, "Denny, an engineer? Why, you always said you wanted him to be a doctor." There was alarm in her voice. Oh, why didn't that wind stop howling? Why didn't those pines stop striking against the walls? No, dear, not a doctor. He must be an engineer. Her husband was talking a little hurriedly now, in jerks. Doris should have an educational course. She will become a fine teacher. And you, well, someday you will be their guardian. Invest wisely, especially those Grayson bonds. They should be changed as soon as possible and invested in the first issue of the C&I stock. That is safe. Howling of the wind. If it would only cease. Why did her husband talk like this in that strange, low voice? She laughed a bit nervously and said chokingly, "Please, dear, don't talk like that. You sound as though you were making a will." The word sent a chill along her spine. A will? Why, yes, it did sound as if her husband was making a will. His voice continued, calmly ignoring her remark. The C&I bonds are the safest. If sometime you should be called upon to look after finances, it would be advisable to invest all. Do you understand? All, in that, even insurance money, that would provide an assured income. Taking different issues, they would mature at intervals. You have the home, you have your pocket money, the bonds would take care of the education of Denny and Doris, then the front door banged open. The fire on the hearth heaved into sparks, glowed at the puff of the wind, then leaped into flames. Mrs. Bradford glanced at her husband's chair. He was gone. The lights came on. She remained standing, her face tense, staring ahead at that empty chair beside her. Where had he gone? Where was he? She glanced about the room. No one. She rose from the chair, walked to the hall. It was deserted. She opened the door, her hands trembling strangely, and looked into the night. The wind was subsiding, moaning in the west. The pines bent their tops almost to the porch steps, like tired warriors after a battle. The thunder rumbled in the distance. The rain was a drizzle now. The air was strangely still. She remained on the threshold, staring into the night. Then, with an ashen face, she slowly closed the door. She went to the fireplace, walking automatically on tiptoes as if in a trance, numbness paralyzing her faculties. She was trying to reason, trying to think, yet fearing to think. Again she looked about the room, her eyes strangely dilated, searching for what she knew was not there. Her husband was gone the way he had come, out of the night and into the night. Then a strange realization seemed to enter her consciousness. The hat, the coat, he's not looking at her, staring at the fire. Pale, cold. With a scream, Mrs. Bradford fell across the empty chair. The telegram came from Denver the next morning. Bradford had met death in a railroad wreck the previous night at 11. He had returned for a last visit home before he went away forever.